everyone, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with the books that I ended up reading in July. July was an interesting month. I did read so fucking much. I read so much, and I think I read one of my favorite books for this year, and I'm so excited. I can't wait to tell you guys about it. But first, gotta get to my stats for the month. So in total, I read 14 books. 5 of them were off of my TBR, so I count books that I owned previous to this year. That's what I count as my TBR. I had 2 books that were from the ALC program from Libro FM, so those are kind of like audiobook arcs. And then I had also 1 ebook arc that I read this month. In total, I read 4,720 pages, which is about 152 pages a day. I had a goal this year to read 40,000 pages. So after last month, I had 12,765 pages left to read. And then after this month, I'll only have 8,045 pages. The genres I read this month, most of them were horror. So there were 7 horror books that I read this month, 3 fantasy books, 3 thrillers, and 1 that is kind of, I guess, like magical realism. The oldest book I read this month was published in 1976. Then we jumped to 1990. I read a book published in 2013, 2 published in 2018, 2 published in 2019, a book from 2020, a book from 2021, and then 5 books that were published this year, 2022. I'm also trying to keep track of what I read that is from series, because otherwise I read the first book in a series and don't ever get back to it. And then when I want to get back to the series, I read the first book over again because it's been 5 years, and then I don't read any more of the series. So I'm trying to like not do that. And so this month I did end up reading 3 books that were continuations of series that I've been reading, and I finished 1 series. I mean, like, not the whole series this month, but I read the last book in a series and I finished it. Amazing. Where is my cupcake? I'm so proud of myself. The intended audience for these books, let's see, 13 of them were adult books and 1 was YA. I read 1 ebook, I listened to 3 audiobooks, I read 10 physical books, and then of those books, 2 were mangas, 1 was a novella, and 11 were novels. All right, let's get into what I actually read. So the first book I read this month was What Moves the Dead by Kingfisher. This I had as an arc from NetGalley, and this came out July 12th. This book was a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Fall of the House of Usher. And in this, we're following a person named Alex, who's like a retired soldier, and they're going back to kind of check in with their friend Madeline Usher and her brother Roderick Usher, who Alex served with in the previous, I don't know, war battle thing that happened. This takes place, I think, in sometime in the 1800s. So it's a little old-timey, but Kingfisher really does a great job making the characters still feel lively, and it's kind of gothic-y, but it's a novella, so it's pretty fast-paced still. Pretty fast-paced. So Alex is going to visit Madeline, who is very sick. She's written to him and she's not doing very well at all. So he's going up to their estate, and the house that they're living in is like their ancestral home, and it is falling apart. It's gross and damp and moldy, and it's got this fungus all over the place, like in the house and on the grounds. And some of the wildlife is starting to act really strange as well, as Alex notices as they, you know, ride up to this house. And the rabbits in particular are doing some weird stuff. And I think that's all I can really tell you about the plot in this, because it is a novella. It's fairly short. I think it does take a little bit to get going, but it's once it hits its mark, it really picks up the pace and gets very creepy. So I liked this. I really liked Alex's character. They're a non-binary character, and Kingfisher created this system where, and I didn't look into this to see if this is a real thing, but the character Alex comes from, I don't know, a place where that's not a big deal and they just use different pronouns and it's just fine and everyone just accepts that, which I like, you know. It's not a book about somebody on the gender spectrum where it's like trauma is happening to them, you know. And I mean, I do enjoy books like that, but not every book has to be like that, and not every book has to be about someone's queerness. Like, they can just exist and be a human being and be in a story, and it doesn't have to be complicated. They can just be themselves, and we can just say, this is this character, and fucking move on with it and enjoy the book and this character, you know what I mean? So I really like that. It had some good body horror. It had some interesting, I don't know, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on, that's really interesting, and how why things are functioning the way that they are is really interesting. And I like this. I actually like this a lot more than the last Kingfisher book I read, which I think was the Hollow Ones, which was okay, but this one was definitely better. The next book I read was The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater, and this came out, I believe, in 2013. This is the second book in the Raven cycle, and it's a story about this young girl named Blue. She's a high school student, and she meets these other high school students who go to a private school in the small southern town that she lives in. They call them the Raven Boys because the like emblem for their school has a raven. So there's these 4 boys, and the kind of leader of this gang, his name is Kenzie, and he is obsessed with this Welsh king that is somewhere, and he thinks he's narrowed down the man's kind of like burial place, but Kenzie himself doesn't really believe it's a burial place, and there's all this like magic kind of going on, like earth magic, and you know, that's really the first book, and obviously some of that continues onto this, but it gets even deeper in this one, and I can't say too much because I don't want to give anything away, but this book was really so good, and it really focuses on the character Ronan, who is really gruff, but in this book you really deal with some of the issues he's had in his past with his parents, and it was really good. I really like this series, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. I'm so glad that I reread the first book and you know, decided to continue on with the series because the second book is really excellent as well. Then I read a book I've been dying to get to. This is Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby, and this was published in 2020, and oh my gosh, I loved this. I'm so glad that I loved this because I read his more recent book, Razorblade Tears, before I read this. And then I was like, oh no, what if this one doesn't live up to Razorblade Tears? Because that was probably my favorite book that I read last year. And luckily this did. I think Razorblade Tears has a little more heart in it, and that could be because you know, just because of the plot, because it's these 2 dads dealing with the death of their sons, and you know, that really, like, as a parent, not that people who aren't parents can't also feel really deeply about that, but you know, that really tugs at my heartstrings, obviously. But this one is also about a parent, but his kids are okay. His name is Bug, and his dad kind of taught him how to be a really good driver, I suppose. And Bug has used that to be a getaway driver, basically. And he is really well known for that. But at this point in his life, he's taken a step back from that. He owns a mechanic shop, and he's just trying to do that. He's trying to be on the up and up. He has a family, and he wants to be successful. Not just successful, but like he wants to be a successful father, I guess is what I mean. He doesn't want to be like his dad, who eventually ended up having to disappear, and who knows what happened to him. But unfortunately, things are getting tight financially for Bug, and he is really worried about losing his shop. And so he does take the opportunity when someone approaches him and asks if he wants to help in sort of a heist and you know, be a getaway driver again. And he does do that, and that eventually leads to a lot of trouble for Bug. And man, this book is much more sad at the end than Razorblade Tears. I'll let you read this and see why for yourself, but it definitely was like, oh, you know, when your heart kind of sinks at the end of a book. But it's not because it's a bad book, it's because like of the decisions that the characters have to make, you know what I mean? And what that could possibly mean. It is a tiny bit ambiguous at the end, but yeah, I don't know. This is just a great book. S.A. Cosby is such a fantastic author. His characters are just so rich and fleshed out, and I really like this book. I also read The Plants by Kenneth McKenney. This one was published in 1976, and this was included in my trope video, so if you want to hear about that, you'll have to go watch that. Let me just say this blurb that says, a superbly crafted novel of horror and high suspense might not be true. Alright, I also took the time to read volumes 3 and 4 of Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. These are very strange mangas. I really don't know like what kind of a category this would fall into if I were to put it in a genre, but it has some weird like bad vibes, you know what I mean? These were both published in English in 2018, but obviously they came out in Japan previous to that. So this is about this teenage boy, a young teenage boy named Seiichi, and his mother his whole life has been very doting, basically anything for Seiichi, but it seems like his mother's affection might come at a cost, and there's something not quite right about the relationship, but it's like this walks on the edge of like something very wrong happening, but it doesn't quite like take the leap to something very wrong, you know what I mean? And it's very suspenseful, and I know I say this every single time, but I think it's really important. The way that the illustrations are, they just really focus on people's facial expressions in this, and you really get everyone's emotions very well. It translates very well, and this is just such a strange story, and I don't even know what to tell you guys about it really, but it's very compelling, and I have volumes 5 and 6, and I'm definitely going to be getting to those soon. Then I read Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder, which came out in 2021, and this was one of my 5-star predictions for this year, and I don't think this quite met a 5-star status, but I did enjoy it. This is about a mother, and you don't get her name at all. You don't get her name or her son's name or her husband's name. The way it's written is almost like stream of consciousness, you know what I mean? It's like we're just living in this person's head, and we get everything that comes to their mind. And this woman is a stay-at-home mother with a young toddler, and it's been rough. And I think that some of the descriptions, some of the depictions of being a mother they just feel so accurate, and that could be because my daughter was really an unhappy baby for a really long time, and it was hard, and she's still kind of like just disagreeable, but it's just her nature. We deal with it, right? Yeah, she's just always kind of been like that, and it was really hard for me because I feel like when I had her, it was like this is motherhood? Are you kidding? Like, are you kidding me? This is what it's like? Because you expect all these things, and I think society really wants moms to just be happy and act happy, and you know, act like motherhood is this precious thing that everyone should do and everyone should love and stuff like that. And sometimes that's just not the case. And it's really hard for some moms, and it's hard for this mom in this book. And so I've really felt connected to that aspect of this book. But her parenting does seem to become easier because this mom thinks that she's starting to turn into a were-dog, and she starts to call herself Nightbitch, and Nightbitch thinks she's turning into a dog. And it's really a story where you're like, is this happening? Is this woman having some sort of like postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis kind of stuff going on? And it's troubling, but it's fascinating. But the way it is written is kind of hard, especially because I really hate when books don't have quotation marks when people are speaking, and I get that this is just the way that this story is told, but it really throws me off, and I feel like I have to take greater care when I'm reading that so I can, you know, sometimes I just like have to go back and read things, and that is a little bit irritating to me. But yeah, I don't know, something about that just almost, I don't know, it didn't ruin my reading experience, but it definitely made it harder than it had to be, and that could just be me. But I thought this was really interesting. I liked the way this went, but it didn't really have a clear plot either. It was just really this person thinking that this stuff is happening to them, and is it? I don't know. I mean, you just kind of have to read and find out. But yeah, so there's things I really liked about this and things that I didn't like so much, but all in all, it was a book and I liked it. It's just not quite like a 5-star book for me. All right, next, another book I was so excited to pick up this month. This is Vultures by Chuck Wendig, and this was published in 2019. This is the 6th and final book in the Miriam Black series, and I am very bummed out to be done with that. I'm very bummed out to be done. Just have to like say goodbye to Miriam, who is probably one of my very favorite literary characters of all time. This is about Miriam, and Miriam suffered a trauma that caused her to have this power where if she touches somebody, she sees how they die. And for a long time she lived with that, but it's not exactly something that she wants to do, because, you know, she feels compelled to help these people and to change fate, which is not good and has gotten her into a lot of trouble. And so I don't want to give anything away, obviously, but this is her arc where she starts out as somebody who's just kind of trying to get by, and then, you know, she wants more out of her life than that, and she meets people who she has connections with, and it's just been such a fucking wild ride. And I think each book in the series has gotten better and better, and, you know, reading this whole series, being done with it, it's really solidified that Chuck Wendig is one of my favorite authors, for sure. This book was excellent. It had a really great conclusion, and I'm so glad that I picked Blackbirds up, because I really didn't think that it would be my thing at first, you know, like people were talking about it. I picked Blackbirds up about the time that this came out, so people were talking about how good this series was, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a try, you know, and I'm so glad that I did, and that I read it, and that I loved it. Man, it's just been such a great series. One of my all-time favorite series, I think, and would definitely recommend it. Next is The Undertaking of Hart and Mercy by Marie Bannen, and this came out in 2022, and I actually got a copy of the audiobook from the Libro FM ALC program this month. So it's basically like audio arcs, and I got that and I listened to it, and it was like, okay, this is good, you know. And then, surprise, surprise, in my adult Fairy Loot package, that's book only, here it is, here it came. I don't think this comes out in the US until September, so this was a pleasant surprise. And of course, being that it's a Fairy Loot book, it has just a really beautiful, you know, book. It's a beautiful book, and this is something that I probably wouldn't have picked up except for that the cover looked really cute. And this is definitely a romance book. That's at the center of this. The focus of this book is this romance, and it's an enemies to lover romance. This takes place in a fantasy world, and there's this guy, right, Hart, and he is a demigod, and he is somebody called a marshal who kind of takes care of the mortals in this world and keeps them safe from these like reanimated corpses that happen sometimes. And Mercy is a undertaker, so when Hart kills one of these I can't remember, I think they call them dregs in this. When they kill a dreg, they had to take them to an undertaker, and Mercy's shop is like one of the only ones who will take these certain kinds because of this government thing, right, where keyless corpses get taken here as kind of like a government subsidiary type of deal, right? And so Hart has to bring them here, but him and Mercy do not get along. They just like started off on the wrong foot as, you know, small misunderstandings, and them both being a little bit egotistical, and then it just gets worse and worse, and now for years they've hated each other. But Hart sends out this letter in the mail, just addressed to nobody, and he's looking for a friend, so it's just like titled Dear Friend, and he talks about himself, but he doesn't reveal his name or his occupation or anything like that. And lo and behold, it gets delivered to Mercy, who starts writing back to him, kind of doing the same thing, you know, not revealing much about her personal details, but a lot about her personality, obviously. And they have this correspondence, and things go from there, and it was very cute. There's just enough plot to keep it going. There's some stuff that Hart's dealing with and some things that Mercy is dealing with. I guess the two things is, besides like this enemies to lovers thing, I didn't really feel a lot of chemistry between Hart and Mercy. And also the world building was really sparse. Like, Hart is a demigod and they live in this fantasy world, but we don't ever really get that fleshed out. There's not really a lot about that at all. It's just really the relationship between Hart and Mercy. So I don't know. If you're looking for a fantasy book, I would probably not recommend this, but this wouldn't be at the top of the list. But if you're looking for a romance book, I would say probably yes, pick this up. It's very cute and not something I would choose at all. In fact, I'm trying to think about it, like, why did I choose this out of the ALC things? And I think it was because it said Undertaking, and I think it was because the cover was teal and it was cute, like a cute cover, and so I picked it. I was like, why not, you know, if this is a free audiobook basically, like, why not? And yeah, I thought it was really cute, but probably not a type of book that I want to read over and over, but it was cute. Okay, then I read Reception by Kenzie Jennings, and this came out in 2019. This is a book about Ansley, and Ansley is attending her sister's wedding, and she's a bridesmaid, and she is leaving rehab temporarily for the weekend to attend this wedding. And so, you know, she's in rehab. You're not really sure like for what, but you know that she's having serious withdrawals from whatever medication she had been taking. Her family life is a little bit tense, but she really loves her sister and she's glad to be there. But she also doesn't really get along with her new in-laws, and they are at a resort. So basically it's secluded. It's just a very small amount of Ansley's family. It's mostly like her in-laws, friends and family at this resort, and during the reception things start to get hairy, and well, it says, right, there are cannibals. The groom's family is a bunch of cannibals. Okay, this is like a 200-page book. It takes almost exactly half of it to get to the action parts, but I found that once I got to the action parts, my interest in this actually like dropped, and I really was involved in the first half of this book, and I was really interested to see where this was going. And then it was like, once I knew for sure where this was going, it wasn't as interesting to me, unfortunately. Which is kind of funny because a lot of the reviews I read said the opposite. The beginning was a real slog for them, and then at the halfway point things really were more actiony, which is true. I don't know. Once we got to the action, it felt like they were just running around a lot, which is something I really don't like in a book. Like, if that's on the screen, that's a little bit different, I think, but I really don't like that in a book. It's so boring to me when they're like, oh, hide here, oh, hide here, you know what I mean? Over and over again for 100 pages, and that is a little bit like what the end was like. And there is also this twist at some point, and I really did not understand that. Another thing that I didn't understand with this writing is that Ansley herself keeps hinting that something seems off, but reading it, nothing seemed off to me. So I'm not really sure if that is on purpose, or if the author was just trying to show us or tell us instead of show us, you know what I mean? When Ansley's like, something's off here, but like there's nothing. So what's going on? I don't know. So I feel really mixed about this. I definitely did not enjoy this as much as others. I liked the first half better. A lot of people liked the second half better. And I don't know. This is really a toss-up. Well, I have to say, unfortunately, my next read I didn't love either, and that is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This came out in this year, 2022. This came out this month. Usually I would do a separate review with this included. However, I don't have a lot to say about why I didn't like it. So there's not enough for like a full fucking review, you know? I just didn't like it. This is a fake memoir written by somebody whose name is not actually Art Barbara, but he's the one who wrote it. And I think one of the most clever things about this book is the way it's formatted. See, it says Pallbearers Club by Art Barbara, and that's crossed out. And not only that, but this memoir is written by Art. However, his friend Mercy has taken the liberty of sort of editing it for him, and that means she's written in the margins this red ink, and she's also done these things at the end of every chapter describing like what really went on, because this is about Art's life and his involvement with Mercy. And so it starts out, Art is in high school, and he's kind of a weirdo, nerdy kid. He's got really bad scoliosis, so he describes his posture as a question mark, and like, I can relate to that, because you might know, I've talked about it a few times, but I have this neck problem that basically has been caused by my bad posture. I have like this forward neck slouchy thing that I just do naturally, and it's fucking fucked up my neck, right? And I don't have scoliosis, luckily. This is something that hopefully I'm able to strengthen, you know, my upper body and my neck enough to where that posture goes away. But Art can't do that, unfortunately. And it seems to be getting better when we start the book. He is wearing a brace at night, he's doing his exercises, he's going to physical therapy, and it seems to be getting better. He starts this extracurricular club called the Pallbearers Club, where he eventually meets Mercy, and Mercy is kind of strange. He can tell that she's older, but he's not sure how much older. He thinks maybe only a year or two, but he's not really sure. And as we go on through this book, he's never really sure how old Mercy is, because she seems somehow ageless. And so Art's feeling better, like his health is getting better, but as he hangs out more and more with Mercy, it seems like he's going backwards in his ability to move, and the curvature of his spine and stuff like that, and really they're like, well, why is this happening? Because he's really trying to make sure that his back is better, right? And so it's kind of suspicious that this is all happening when Mercy comes around, and I don't really know how much else to tell you about this, but basically this takes place throughout Art's life. He is writing this, and things kind of repeat themselves. So he'll hang out with Mercy, and then in the beginning an event happens. Then they kind of don't speak to each other for a long time, and then, you know, they meet again and the same thing kind of happens, and it's like this cyclical thing where he doesn't talk to Mercy for years, and then they end up meeting up again, and then something happens and he doesn't speak to her for years, and that's just how his life goes. And that is the plot, is that he has a weird relationship with Mercy, I guess, and Mercy is very strange herself, and I don't really know what else to tell you. I can't really put my finger on what I really disliked about this. Art was a very important character. He has kind of a failure to thrive thing going on, in my opinion, and he's not very interesting. He's very confused about everything that's going on in his life, and he's not a compelling character to me. So like, I didn't care to hear about his entire life, but that's what this is. It's a memoir. Or is it? I don't know. It depends on if you ask Art or if you ask Mercy, I suppose. I think the most clever part about this was having Mercy's input on what was happening or what wasn't happening, and it kind of leaves you wondering what really was going on. But I think that the ending was really good though, which is kind of weird, right? But the ending was so excellent, and yeah, so that really bumped it up for me, I think. This made this kind of not so great book tolerable. I'm glad that I finished it, I guess, because the ending was so good, but really there were points where I was like, if I put this down, I'm just gonna forget about it. I just don't care about it. So, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know. I think that nothing has captured me like, well, I haven't read Disappearance at Devil's Rock yet, but I loved A Head Full of Ghosts, and I loved Cabin in the Woods? No, that's not what it's called. Cabin at the End of the World. I love that one. So yeah, I feel like his last two just really have not hit the mark for me. And I don't know if that's because I loved the first two that I read so much or what, but Survivor Songs 2, it just didn't have enough punch for me. And I think also this didn't either. This feels more literary than horror. I'm a little surprised to see all the great reviews, but I felt that way about Survivor Song 2. I was like, wow, so many people love this, and I just feel like it was so flat. And here we are again. Okay, so I've got 3 more books to talk about here. I read so many fucking books this month. Next I finished The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, which is the second Wheel of Time book. This is a book that I was listening to at bedtime. Like when I'm trying to fall asleep, I'll set a timer for like 10-15 minutes and hopefully I'll zonk out before then. This is basically like a chosen one story where there is a young man named Rand Althor, and he might be something they call a dragon, and it is very fucking complicated. There are like these 2 sides of this magic, like one that only women can access and one that only men can access, and the women who can do this, they're called Aes Sedai, and they kind of go into this institution to like train to be Aes Sedai, and then I don't know what they do other than that, right? It's kind of weird. And the men who can access this magic, they typically become insane and have to be killed. So Rand is really worried when he learns that he can channel this magic. And in the first book, they're basically trying to leave their little town because these people are hunting for who might be the dragon. And then in the second book, you know, we know a little more of what's going on, and there is this great hunt for this like horn that's been stolen. And that's really most of this book, is they're like traveling around trying to follow this man who stole the horn. And Rand is kind of a sourpuss in this book. But like, I mean, he is the chosen one, right? But there are other characters, some that are more interesting than him. And there's this thing that happens to some of the Aes Sedai, or the young ladies who can channel this magic, who are supposed to be training to be Aes Sedai. There's this really interesting thing that happens to them. They're like taken somewhere, and that part is really interesting to me. I don't know. It was a good bedtime book because like it wasn't always very exciting, so it was easy to you know, like let my brain rest as I'm listening to it. Yeah, it was okay. I'm going to read the third one, I guess, and probably the same way, you know, it being my bedtime audiobook. So yeah, that's it. All right, then I had another book that I got through the ALC program from Libra FM. This was The Last to Vanish by Miranda, and this came out this month. This is a thriller. This was an alright thriller. This is about this young woman named Abby, and she has worked for a decade now at this little mountainside inn in a tiny little mountain town. So it has some of those tropes that people might like a small town with secrets, a small town where the locals are really tight-knit and they kind of you know, don't want any outsiders in their business, they don't want any tourists in their business. It takes a long time to be considered one of them, as the main character finds out, because she's been there for a fucking decade and people still treat her like she's not one of them. The premise is really interesting because she works at this inn, and there are lots of hiking spots around there, obviously, and this inn has been tied to a few different disappearances. The first one is this group of 4 like college-age men who got together to go hiking and disappeared. And that kind of triggered all these other people who have come to look and be trauma tourists and stuff like that. So like then this young woman comes and, you know, she's interested in the disappearance, and then she disappears. And then this other young woman comes to look into this disappearance, and then she disappears. And then this young man comes looking into this disappearance of these now 6 people, right? And he also disappears. And then when we're starting the story, his brother has come to look into his disappearance, and I'm not going to tell you if he disappears or not. Abby, she is really, she doesn't own the inn, but it's like only her and one other woman who basically work the inn. So she is doing all the day-to-day shit, right? And so with these people disappearing, there is a lot of looky-loos. There's a lot of people who ask about that stuff, and now she's dealing with a man whose brother recently disappeared there, which is a lot of pressure, obviously, because the last place he was this inn. And so yeah, I mean, things go from there. Obviously there is this mystery of like what happened to all of these people, and I found that mystery to be very compelling. And I also really enjoyed the setting and these tropes, like small town with secrets and people wanting to protect the locals and stuff like that. And so that was really fun. But I felt like once everything was solved, it wasn't quite as fun as maybe I had hoped it would be. And another thing is, this really took its time in its pacing, I guess. There is a lot of the story before anything starts to happen with these disappearances. So I don't think it was a waste of my time, and I think it was a pretty good thriller. I don't know if I'd read any of Miranda's older stuff, but I might try maybe her next book if she publishes anything after this. But I think the best part of this was definitely the setting. It was definitely the setting. Okay, and lastly, and definitely most favoritely, probably my favorite book I've read this year, is Blackmouth by Ronald Malfi, and this came out this month. I think I'm gonna do like a separate review for this. So what I'm gonna tell you guys is I really liked this book a lot. I think that this might be his best book yet. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'm gonna tell you. I really loved it though. There it is. Those are the 14 books I read this month. Holy cow. I'd love to know if you've read any of these and what you thought about them, what your favorite books were this month. As always, I have a list in my description for my bookshop.org. I have a list of all these books on there if any of those are of interest to you. Other than that, that's just all that I have for today. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye!